30 years ago, during the war against the demons, it was the Mervinger family's efforts that led the anti-demon forces to victory. But the cost was heavy. Most of the family was killed, leaving behind only 2 survivors, 8-year-old Elric Mervinger and his sister. Soon, those who once followed the Mervingers turned their backs on the orphaned children. Witnessing such cruelty at a young age, Elric swore to become a powerful wizard one day, but life gave him more lemons. Elric was diagnosed with a rare condition known as mana avascularity, which made it impossible for him to practice magic, turning him into a laughingstock. Despite endless efforts to cure his illness, nothing really worked. Then one day, it seemed his prayers were finally answered. He encountered a dragon, the only hope to cure his condition and restore the Mervinger legacy. To his shock, the dragon was already dead. In its place stood the shadow of a horned man, with an eerie smile. Gazing at Elric, he thinks that he has a new body to possess now. Walking closer, he offered Elric the chance to become one with him, to destroy this world and create a new one together. Dark energy began to swirl around Elric's body, occupying his vessel. That's when realization hits him. This had been a test set by the Dark Prince all along. If only he had known the consequences, Elric would have never set out in search of the dragon. Yet even as he stood on the brink, he vowed to himself that he would not let himself be devoured so easily. Elric is given the news about his mana avascularity, along with the fact that the doctors have tried everything to cure it, but, unfortunately, found no solution. This means he won't be able to use magic for the rest of his life. Later, at Usdan Academy, he calls his sister, Heise, who seems worried about his condition and asks about what the doctor said. Even though Elric knows there's no cure, he assures her that he can take care of himself and will be fine soon. Still, Heise can't help but worry. Elric, sensing this, makes up an excuse and cuts the call. Anxiously, he wonders how he's going to tell her that he might have to come back home soon. After that, Elric makes his way to the results board to check the end-of-term results. It turns out Elric passes all the theory exams with flying colors. Yet again, he fails the magic practice exams. It's his 4th failure in a row, which means he's going to be expelled. He studied every single paper to get the highest rankings. Not just that, he had the brains and a natural instinct to detect and interpret mana, talents any wizard would dream of. Still, no matter how amazing those talents were, his condition made it impossible to practice magic. One of Elric's teachers suggested he become a professor instead, but that wouldn't help him restore his family's glory. Elric's grandfather, Usdan Mervinger, known as the Wizard of the Stars, was a hero in the war against the demons. He built the very school Elric now attends. Being expelled from it would be as humiliating as bringing disgrace to his family name with his own hands. Just then, he hears 2 freshmen gossiping about him and walks up to them. Elric stops them, threatening to report them to their teaching assistant, Sean. The 2 freshmen quickly leave. Later, Elric reads a book, searching for a cure to his illness. Suddenly, he gets slapped. Turning around, he sees it's Sean, furious at him for using his name to threaten people. Sean Neresta is from the prestigious Neresta family. Since the fall of the Mervingers, the Turium has been run by Hexacle, formed by the top 6 families of the Empire. One of them is the Neresta family. Despite all this, Sean is Elric's only friend, the one who's always been there for him. As they sit together, Sean passes Elric a paper telling him about the Diamond Dragon exploration plan. He suggests Elric join the party, since the location of a new type of proto-dragon has been discovered. Hearing this, Elric grabs the paper instantly, unable to believe that the mystical beast, possibly the origin of magic, has been found. His excitement is so clear that Sean starts boasting about how great of a friend he is, but all Elric can think about is that there must be a cure for his illness out there. Still, this isn't a personal project, so the findings would belong to the dean. Suddenly, Elric slams the map on the table and starts laughing like a madman. Sean, a bit confused, watches as Elric points at the map, declaring the den isn't where everyone thinks it is. Loud enough, Elric points at the map and suggests that the den is not there. As Sean hears that, he looks around and realizes that nobody heard that, so he advises Elric to stay careful, as he doesn't want to be on the wrong foot with the professors, since they took part in that. Still, it doesn't change the fact that Elric is right. Sean tells him to keep his mouth shut and act like a gentleman, considering the background of the Neresta family. Then, through his magic, Sean draws a circle around the map to further investigate it. Both of them see a fissure, where 2 tectonic plates collide, and an insane amount of mana flows out. Elric realizes that its worth is around 100,000 years, and the criteria seem to resemble that of the Dragon's Den. After that, Elric wonders about the 3 principles of the mana stream, to which Sean replies after being a bit hesitant. He says from high to low, from wide to narrow, from hot to cold. If Elric searches using those rules, he will find a fissure in no time. But then, Sean points at a place and tells Elric to keep in mind that there is a stream of extremely hot groundwater which hinders mana accumulation, making it tough to survive for dragons. Sean's eyes fall on Mount Akron, which is spitting out lava, and Elric comes to the realization that the heated groundwater from the mount flows all across the continent. Coming back to reality, Sean, out of confusion and frustration, can't believe that there's no den, as they already detected a dragon magic wave from that area. Meanwhile, Elric smiles and says that he never mentioned there isn't a den there, and instead points out that it's in the Caragul cave. Later on, Sean makes his way to the dean's office, but he's hesitant about how he should mention that to him, since he could get expelled. But it could also be the case that what Elric said was true. Anyhow, Sean hears some sound from the training room, and it turns out to be Elric, who was trying to focus on his mana, to regain his family's long-lost glory. Sean sees his friend struggling, and realizes that this could be the only chance his illness can get cured. So, as a true friend, he decides to help him and enters the dean's office. As the dean hears that, he takes this as a blow to his ego, that his research team could be wrong. Sean tries to convince him otherwise, but the dean seems furious and says that Sean will be paying for the consequences, no matter what his background is like. The dean himself is a seven-circle wizard and begins emitting a massive chunk of mana. But before anything could happen, Elric slams open the door. Elric bows down to the dean and apologizes for entering like that. The dean goes straight to the point and questions whether he convinced Sean to say that. Elric agrees, to which the dean says that he is grateful for his insight, but argues that it's all based on a gut feeling without any proof. Elric smiles and says that his opinion is based on common sense, so easy that even a kid could understand it. Meanwhile, Sean is crying silent tears, wondering why Elric is taunting the dean. On the other hand, the dean taunts back that Elric is nothing but a failing student who can't even concentrate mana. Still, Elric stays serious, to which the dean says that there are people who do get lucky, and then there are people who are worthless scum and don't know where they belong, pointing at Elric. But of course, being a professor, he can't ignore Elric's opinion entirely, so he suggests a wager. Elric asks for an elaboration on the idea, so the dean explains that he will grant Elric permission to recruit the exploration party, and even if he needs more money to buy anything, that budget will be given. But there is one condition. The condition being, if he fails, there is one thing that the dean wants from him, and that is his grandfather's one and only heirloom. Later, as the carriage rolls steadily, Sean loses his temper at Elric for agreeing to the dean's deal. Elric, however, seems completely unbothered, continuing to read his book with a detached calm. Frustrated, Sean snatches the book from his hands and shouts that if they fail to locate the den, he will lose his family's heirloom, an artifact passed down through generations. That heirloom is none other than the Grand Collar of Wizardry, a relic the dean has had eyes on for years. Strangely, Elric keeps smiling. That carefree smile only enrages Sean further, because he too will be dragged into ruin if Elric fails. Still angry, Sean demands to know what Elric plans to do next. Elric finally sits up and, to Sean's surprise, reveals that he didn't accept the dean's wager because he wants to stay in the academy. He then declares that if the dean wants the Mervinger family's treasure, then he'd better be prepared to give up his position as dean. A little anxious, Sean remembers other than being labeled the shame of the Mervinger family, Elric once earned another infamous title, the Mad Dog of the Mervinger family. Elric suddenly wears an eerie smile which makes Sean uneasy. 7 years ago, when they first entered the academy and Elric was only 15, most of the other students were already practicing their mana. Due to his condition, Elric lags behind, which leads to whispers and doubt. People question whether he's even a true Mervinger and gets bullied often that he's probably adopted. Sean pities Elric, sure, but he pities the ones who provoke him even more, because Elric always makes sure they pay the price. Later, Elric gets appointed to Uzdon Academy's disciplinary committee. Whenever asked about his ruthless justice, Elric casually states that he punishes his bullies according to the Empire's law. Eventually, he's suspended. The Academy's regulations hold that all students are equal, but after that incident, no one dares cross him again. Snapping back to the present, Sean suddenly notices what Elric is reading. It's a banned book and Elric is reading it in plain sight. Sean gets furious and begins to yell, demanding to know what Elric's intentions are. Nervously, Elric admits that if he gets caught, he could very well be executed. But Sean insists. Why is he reading the Tiger King's body fortification? Elric replies innocently. He believes there might be a way to cure his condition in that book. After all, back in ancient times, the Tiger King led the Therianthropes and invaded the Empire. His body fortification made him nearly invincible. It took the Empire's full might to repel the Therianthropes and drive them beyond the borders. A wall was raised to keep them out, and the Tiger King lost the ability to use his fortification. Sean interrupts. Hadn't the scholars failed to restore it? But Elric calmly corrects him. The scholars, in fact, did succeed in restoring it. Now Elric's task is to find a way to apply that to his own body. Sean can hardly believe it, but in the end, he decides to trust Elric. Suddenly, the carriage comes to a stop. Alerted, both Sean and Elric step outside to see what's going on. In front of them stands Liburn and his group. Sean steps in front of Elric, ready to defend him, but Liburn gives up soon, stating that the Dean sent them to offer assistance. At first, Elric finds the gesture suspiciously kind. He doesn't need help, certainly not from the Dean. Sean leans toward him and whispers that some of Liburn's group are concealing their true strength, a move typical of the greedy Dean Veru. But Elric has come prepared. A little while earlier, back at the academy, Veru realizes something that makes his blood run cold. Elric has taken Gehenna's breath and the sky armor with him. Gehenna's breath is a devastating item, containing ever-burning sulfur capable of turning anything into ash. And sky armor, a legendary relic, offers powerful protection against both elemental magic and physical trauma. Varix loses his mind. The idea of handing over 2 4-star items to the mad dog of the Mervinger family is sheer madness. He can't let anyone find out. But a thought crosses his mind. What if Elric really does find the den? Varix mutters under his breath. Elric is a Mervinger after all. To cover his tracks, Veru quietly decides to fire several researchers. After all, how could a mere student discover something that trained scholars failed to see? He shakes off his anxiety with a sinister smile. Varix reassures himself that soon, thanks to Elric's foolish little bet, the Grand Collar of Wizardry will be in his possession. Once he obtains it, the position of minister will be within reach. The hunger for power burns clear in Veru's eyes. Elric may have won the bet, but that means nothing if he doesn't survive long enough to return. Elric deciphers the ancient text, and with that done, Sean traces the lingering mana in the air. Unleashing an overwhelming surge of his own mana, Sean pinpoints the exact location of the hidden den. At that moment, everyone realizes Elric had been right all along. Without wasting a second, Elric turns to the team and shouts that they need to move fast, before the beam of light marking the location vanishes. Hearing this, Sean wastes no time. He grabs Elric by the waist and bolts forward with blinding speed, leaving the rest of the group far behind. A while later, the others finally arrive at the marked location, only to be stunned by what they see, or rather, what they don't. There's nothing there. No cave, no den, just open space. Dragons rarely settle in such exposed areas, adding to their confusion. Liburn, seizing what he thinks is a golden opportunity to humiliate Elric, steps forward with a smirk. But before he can say a word, Elric asks Sean to blast a hole into the ground. Without hesitation, Sean unleashes a massive explosion, carving a deep pit beneath them. To everyone's surprise, a hidden den is revealed below. A dense wave of mana surges up from the depths, taking their breath away. Elric knows that it's just a release of mana, and tells everyone to calm down as they prepare to descend. He leads the way, and the rest begin to follow. The cave is freezing cold. Even with Sean using his magic to keep the group warm, the cold persists. As they go deeper, Elric suddenly raises a hand and orders them to stop. Something just gave him the chills, and not from the cold cave. Elsewhere, deeper within the cave, an eerie creature with a single glowing eye, bound in chains and hidden from sight, can't contain his excitement. It senses the newcomer's presence. Back at the front of the group, Sean and Elric approach a towering stone door, the true entrance to the dragon's den. The team is eager, but debates whether to open it by force or through magic. But Elric quickly halts them, warning that the door is protected by a dragon's enchantment. Touching it recklessly could trigger deadly consequences. Meanwhile, Liburn strays from the group and finds himself next to an ornate gold handle. Out of sheer curiosity, he touches it. Elric notices and screams at him to stop, but it's already too late. The entire gate begins to shake and rumble violently. A thunderous rumble echoes through the cave, and Elric in an instant realizes that it is a trap. To protect the group from the danger of the den, Sean raises a powerful magic shield for protection. He turns to Elric and urges him to decipher the next segment of the text before it's too late. The others are on edge, as no one wants to die in an isolated den. But Elric remains focused. He tells everyone to stay calm. He sees the moment for what it is, not just a trap, but a test. The answer, he believes, is right there, hidden in plain sight. He just has to trust himself, like he always has. Now all he has to do is be quick with decoding the answer. As Sean holds the protective barrier and panic stays around them, Elric finishes deciphering the inscription. He turns to the group and urges them to hold it together, because if his calculations are correct, he might just lead them all out of this waking nightmare. Holding the gold handle tightly, Elric chants a spell, desperately hoping the nightmare will turn into a daydream, as everyone's lives now depend on him. The gods must have been with him that day, because somehow, his tricks worked. The rumbling ceased, and the terrible situation was finally over. Sean, completely exhausted and drenched in sweat, falls to the ground. Seeing him panting, Elric rushes over, but Sean quickly assures him that he's completely all right. Meanwhile, the rest of the group checks on each other, making sure everyone is okay. Even after going through such a life or death situation, Sean admits that Elric's work was impressive, a compliment that instantly makes Elric feel a little cocky. Suddenly, without warning, a man is struck by a bolt of magic and collapses to the ground. It's round 2 inside the cave. Reacting quickly, Sean forms a barrier to protect everyone, shouting at Elric to work faster. Elric goes back into action, only to realize something shocking. This isn't just any spell work. This is the origin of magic itself, the legendary dragon tongue magic. With urgency, Elric sprints to the gate as Sean screams that he can't hold on much longer. Just in time, Elric throws the sky armor at the gate, stunning everyone. How on earth did this so-called failure get his hands on a 4-star item? Elric silently prays that it works, and miraculously, it does. The trap is broken. Panting, Elric sits back and realizes that his favorite robe has been completely destroyed. Just then, the gate rumbles and swings open, a bright light coming through. Elric calls out to the team, urging them all to make their way inside. Inside, they are met with a breathtaking sight. Treasure, more than any of them could have imagined. The team stands in awe. Among the loot, Elric finds well-preserved parchments that astonish him further. One of them praises Elric's work and refers to him as the captain. Just then, Sean comes up behind him, grabs him playfully, and praises his sharp thinking. Elric explains that he's always excelled and been great in theory. He had approached the situation like a test, laying out the structural formula of the spell before combining it with elemental magic. Suddenly, a strange realization hits Elric. Something about all of this feels familiar, as though someone had once told him this very thing. Sean notices the distant look in Elric's eyes and asks about it, but Elric brushes it off. Sean then reassures him that no one will ever dare to disrespect him or his family again. Still, Sean admits that something feels a little off, but decides to ignore it for now. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the chamber, Liebern receives orders from a magical globe. He must eliminate Elric. Almost simultaneously, a figure grabs Elric, also addressing him as captain, and drags him away to see a lab. Sean laughs and jokes that Elric's a big boy now, being called captain and all. Soon after, Liebern approaches Sean and traps him with a claim. There's a dragon's corpse hidden behind the hills of treasure. With excitement and curiosity, Sean follows him, assuming Elric will come along later. At the rear of the treasure room, they do indeed find a dragon's corpse, ancient, appearing to be over 4,000 years old. Meanwhile, the ones who dragged Elric away begin beating him up. Elric curses himself for letting his guard down. One of the bullies coldly tells him that he has no choice but to take him out. Everyone else remains distracted, still gawking at the treasure-filled den. Back with Sean, he suddenly notices the dragon's body twitch, a weird sign. At the same moment, Elric tries to scream for help but is gagged by the bullies. He's overwhelmed with regret, thinking about how hard he worked to get here and how foolish he was to trust the wrong people. Just as the bully raises his magic to finish Elric off, something strange happens. He hears Sean's voice echoing through the chamber. For everyone, get out of the way. What Elric sees next is beyond belief. The once-dead dragon is now chasing Sean and Liebern, its awakening lighting up the entire chamber in a blinding glow. Elric is stunned. Trouble after trouble, he surely didn't expect any of this. Elric stands in front of the dragon as the skeletal beast roars at him. Even though he's shaking, he pulls himself together and decides to treat this as part of his test. A test where he finds the dragon and survives its rage. Suddenly, Elric notices something strange. The dragon is staying completely still. His mind races with thoughts. Maybe the dragon is waiting for its breath to reload, or perhaps it's using a massive amount of mana right now. Then it clicks in his mind. The dragon is reloading so it can use its breath multiple times in succession. Elric turns toward the team and tells them to prepare for impact. The whole team, along with Sean, forms a barrier. And just like that, the dragon unleashes its breath. The blast is so powerful that cracks start forming in the shield created by the entire team. Elric calculates that it takes 20 seconds for each breath to reload, and if they can survive this one, they'll have a chance to fight and win against the dragon. Out of the corner of his eye, he looks at the door and calculates that they can reach it in 17 seconds and close it in 3. But before anything can happen, the shield cracks and shatters. It's time for the dragon to reload its breath. Elric screams for the entire team to run at that exact moment. Everyone starts sprinting, and Elric thinks he'll make it past the dragon too. But then, out of nowhere, the legendary troopers, tasked with protecting the dragon, stab him from behind. Sean sees this and yells at Elric to defend himself. Elric knows he's the only one who can handle it. Suddenly, a sharp pain shoots through his head, and everything starts to feel connected. His headache is so severe that he can't hear anything. A trooper comes in for a strike, but Elric dodges it swiftly. That's when he realizes this isn't a delusion. He knows exactly how the troopers will move and attack. He starts connecting the dots and realizes that following a trail of orbs will keep him safe, but he has to stay alert, because it could still be a trap. Taking the risk, he screams for everyone to follow him, and they rush behind Sean and Elric. As they're running, Elric and Sean dodge attacks and protect the team. They're almost at the gates. But then, Liburn, quite literally the headache painkillers were invented for, loses control and tumbles to the ground. He begs Elric to save him. Elric knows the situation is totally screwed, but he can't just leave him there to die. Of course, his morale didn't let Liburn rot all alone in there, so Elric grabs Liburn's hand and pulls him out with him. The troopers are trapped inside, and even if the gate is open, they cannot make it out. On the other hand, Sean is really mad at Elric for not prioritizing himself and putting himself at risk to save Liburn. Nervously, Elric chuckles and says that it wasn't his fault. Meanwhile, the troopers are trying to make their way out, but they can't. It puts Elric into deep thought. Someone must have damaged and manipulated the dragon's spell, and there is surely a good chance that someone got there before they did. Suddenly, Elric sees something and can't believe what he's seeing. Then, the troopers break through the barrier and are now coming to attack them. Everyone tries running, but all the directions are blocked. Being Mr. Smarty Pants, Elric goes back inside as he knows what to do. Sean thinks Elric has gone crazy and tries to stop him, but Elric smiles and tells him he'll catch up in a while. Then the door thuds and shuts behind him. Sean begins banging on the door, trying desperately to get Elric to open it. But it's no use, and Sean shakes at the thought of Elric being all alone inside. 7 years ago, after Elric's suspension period ended, Sean approached him to be friends, but Elric told him to go away, leaving Sean shocked. Every time Sean tried to befriend him, Elric would simply tell him to go away. One day, during a lesson, the entire class was being tested, and the professor told them to run. Sean covered almost half the distance quickly and realized he should have taken Elric with him. Suddenly, Sean tripped and nearly fell off a cliff, barely holding on. The bullies of the class approached Sean, and instead of helping him, they began to bully him. Sean realized he couldn't hold on much longer, but he couldn't use magic either, or he'd fail the test and wouldn't be able to show his father his face. When all hope seemed lost, someone grabbed him. It was Elric. He pulled Sean up and saved his life. Sean told him to go ahead and leave him there, but Elric reminded him that he once asked to be friends. Sean was about to thank him, but Elric simply told him to grab a few artifacts from his house as thanks. Returning to the present, Sean is panicking. He promises Elric to stay put while he brings his father and the elders of his family to save him. Elric appreciates the effort, but he knows he's not dying there. He runs in the direction of the dragon because he knows exactly what he's about to find. Once Elric gets what he's been looking for, he is now armored, thinking to himself that quid pro quo is what life is all about. Finally, he takes out one of the gadgets he's been carrying for the hospitality of the troopers. Elric pulls out the artifact, which is usually activated by mana, but due to his condition, he can't use it. Still, he releases it, even as his eyes begin to bleed. He decides to use his life energy instead to activate it, convinced that this is all part of the dragon's test. He knows that the dragon is the one holding the answers, and looks toward the spear lodged deep inside the dragon's body. He believes that the spear holds the answers, and if his answer is wrong, he's doomed. Even though it's a 50-50 situation, he doesn't back down, even as all the troopers rush toward him. With the proudest smile on his face, he acknowledges that Mervingers never back down. As soon as he pulls out the spear, everything begins to rumble, and the answer he was expecting turns out to be just a hoax. He doesn't know what lies ahead. All he sees is a man with horns. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he knows he's doomed for sure. The man with the horns looks at him, and Elric feels chills running down his spine. The strange man begins to approach him, while the dragon roars in fury and horror. The battle begins between the dragon and the man with horns, while Elric stands frozen, just watching the scene unfold. The amount of mana being released by the strange man is as powerful as that of an 8-circle wizard, or perhaps even stronger. It takes just one slash for the man with horns to end the life of the dragon right then and there. Elric can't believe his eyes. It was that strange man who ended the dragon. Now, the man begins to approach him again, and as he looks at Elric, he thinks to himself that he has found a new body to possess, one that will allow him to escape the prison he's been confined in for ages. The man with horns tries to lure Elric into becoming one with him, promising to burn this world and build a new one. It isn't a choice, it's more of an order. The man with horns is none other than Mephistopheles, the legendary Dark Prince. 1,000 years ago, the humans managed to confine him, but things have finally changed, and now he has found the perfect vessel to possess. The dark energy begins to pour into Elric's body. He thinks to himself that if he had known this wasn't a dragon's test, but rather the devil's trap, he never would have come here. He's about to give up and fall to his knees, while the Dark Prince laughs, observing how Shynike's magic is actually making Elric even stronger. On the other hand, Elric can't stop feeling guilty. His whole family gave their lives to drive out the demons during the war, and that sacrifice took everything away from him and his sister. They were left alone in this cruel world. Even the person they trusted the most turned their back on the poor kids and left them deserted. All Elric ever wanted was to get rid of his illness and bring glory back to his family's name, to make all the betrayers regret the actions they took. Poor Elric is about to give up when suddenly he realizes he hasn't even started yet. He has to fight back because a true Mervenger doesn't get dragged into evil like this. With that resolve, he begins to fight the evil with all his might and will, hoping that his voice will reach his descendants someday in the future. He throws out the spirit of the Dark Prince from his body, leaving even Mephistopheles in shock at the amount of power he felt coming from Elric. Elric Mervenger stands tall, mana radiating from him, so much so that, for the first time, the Dark Prince feels fear in the presence of a human. Elric raises his hand as he aims to engulf the first cup of evil, as it was intended by fate. Suddenly, he finds himself in a place that looks nothing like the den he was trapped in. He has no idea where he is, and he looks at his hands, trying to figure out where he could be. Elric's eyes fall on a man standing at the edge of a cliff, and he wonders who that could be, though he looks strangely familiar. The man in the cloak turns and says that they were a group of scholars who wished to discover the limits of wizardry. In Elric's mind, he realizes this is the voice that has been echoing in his head constantly. The man continues and says that some of them wanted more power than they could even handle. Power so immense, they were willing to be absorbed by demons and do nothing but bring harm to the world. When they realized what they were doing was wrong, they had to repent, so they created a family. The sole purpose of this family was to eradicate evil from the world. But they could never truly stop evil from spreading, because evil will never leave the world. Then, the man in the cloak moves his hands, and Elric screams for him to watch out. Suddenly, Elric opens his eyes in a hospital and sees Sean looking out the window, crying. Sean is pissed that of all the times, Elric had to wake up when he was crying and sobbing like a dramatic lady. Elric assures him that it's okay to cry. Sean tells him that he went back and returned with the rescue squad to save his dumb friend. Elric rubs his head and says that he is the head of a distinguished family, and calling him dumb is inappropriate. Sean calls him dumb again and tells him not to do anything stupid again. Then Sean tells him to stand up for a moment. When Elric does, he realizes that he's gotten taller. Sean tells him to look in the mirror. When Elric sees himself, he wonders what happened and when he changed so drastically. With concern, Sean asks what happened back in the den and what happened to the dragon. Playfully, Elric looks at him and says that he can't tell him at the moment. Sean feels offended. It sucks to have a best friend who keeps secrets. After that, Elric asks Sean about the den, and Sean tells him that his family is protecting it, keeping everyone out since it now belongs to the den's finder, Elric. It's the law. The one who discovers a dragon's den becomes its rightful owner. Sean sighs and proudly says that if only Elric knew what he had to go through to keep the Turium and the Academy away from the den. Elric smiles at Sean, knowing he went as far as he could to save him. Suddenly, Elric realizes that Dean Veru would be greedy enough to try and claim the excavation rights for himself. Strangely, he smiles, knowing that Veru once tried to kill him. Sean realizes that Elric is planning something bad. Elric asks him for a favor, but Sean pretends he can't hear him. Still, Elric says it anyway. He needs Sean to spread the word that he is injured and unconscious, and no matter what noise Sean made, he still ended up hearing him. Sean does what Elric tells him to do. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, it is announced that Elric is unconscious and no visitors are allowed. Everyone greedy for excavation rights tries to force their way inside, but the Neresta family manages to shut down the hospital, leaving everyone waiting. On the other hand, the spokesman of the Neresta family, Karl Duniz, steps into Elric's room but soon leaves. As he exits, Elric turns and says to someone, "When is he going to start talking and stop staring at him?" He calls that person Mephisto. It is none other than the Dark Prince himself, who takes serious offense at being called that. So, Elric suggests another name, but the Dark Prince doesn't like that either. Elric holds his chest as he realizes he knew all along that the dragon heart is the source of the absolute power of the proto-dragons. He wonders if that was the moment when the dragon heart entered him. But something feels different, because he remembers the Dark Prince tried to use his body as a vessel. So, he turns to the Dark Prince for answers. In the prehistoric age, when the rule was in the hands of the gods, there were 4 servants to the Dark Lord. Finis, the Prince of Demise, Insanium, the Prince of Insanity, Fornicaciones, the Prince of Fornication, and lastly, Peccatum Originale, the Prince of Original Sin, known as Mephistopheles. He was the greatest Dark Prince, who is now bothering Elric just to be called by the right name. Coming back to them, the Dark Prince is acting like an angry girlfriend, but Elric doesn't seem to care much. Elric wonders whether all demons are that stupid, or if the Dark Prince just has hearing issues. The Dark Prince gets angry that he waited for 1,000 years only to have his mana stolen by a human. The same Dark Prince who once had plans to have the entire world at his feet, but he did not know what destiny had in store for him. Shinnake, the king of dragons, was the only one who got in the way of the Dark Prince and planned to keep him buried with him for eternity. Since then, the Dark Prince has done nothing but wait for a whole 1,000 years, until one lucky day, Elric came exploring the den. The very human he wanted to possess had also passed all the tests laid by him. He was inches away from getting what he wanted, but all his efforts went in vain, and all he has left now is just a glimpse of his dark powers. Quite literally, he can't understand what kind of magic Elric used that enabled him to absorb all his mana. Meanwhile, Elric just thinks that Mifi is a drama queen. That pisses off the Dark Prince, and he says that all the Mervingers are arrogant. As Elric lays down, he thinks about the monologue, hoping that their voices can reach their descendants someday in the foreseeable future. Suddenly, he thinks that the voice he has been hearing all along was his grandfather's. He remembers the very first thing the voice ever said to him, to engulf the first cup of evil, as was intended by fate, which could have meant absorbing the powers of a demon. He looks at the collar, shocked. This collar must be the tool that lets him consume the Dark Prince, and possibly many more demons.